Imagine for a second that almost every single thought currently bouncing around in your head doesn't actually belong to you.
Right, like they're not even yours.
Exactly. Like your anxieties, your desires, and even, your deeply held fears are really just this recording playing on a loop. And it was originally programmed by someone else entirely.
It's a pretty wild concept to start with.
It totally is. So
Yeah.
welcome to today's deep dive. I am incredibly glad you're here with us because today we are unpacking this really fascinating and frankly kind of disruptive set of notes from a document that's simply titled Jew.pdf.
Yeah, and according to the author of these notes, they basically map out a very specific roadmap for absolute mental clarity and psychological liberation.
Which is a huge promise.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
The overarching mission here is finding freedom through self-understanding and what the text calls choiceless awareness.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this on your commute right now, or maybe, I don't know, you're taking a walk to clear your head, you probably have like a dozen deadlines or obligations or just news alerts bouncing around your brain.
Right, because we live in a society that practically demands this constant information overload.
We really do. We spend almost all of our waking hours just looking outward, right? Like trying to fix our external circumstances or manage all the chaos around us. But this document asks a very pointed question, which is, how often do we actually pause to just look at the machinery of our own minds?
Very rarely, I'd say. I mean, the author argues that we are heavily conditioned to look for solutions entirely outside of ourselves.
Like, if I feel stressed, I just assume I need a new job.
Exactly, yeah. Or if you're unhappy, you think you need a new relationship or a vacation or you just need to buy something new.
Right.
The entire text is basically a massive critique of that outward-facing reflex.
Okay, let's unpack this right out of the gate. What is the fundamental core of what this document is arguing? Like, what's the big picture thesis?
Well, the core thesis, which the author beautifully summarizes in just a single line, is this. The ultimate goal is to observe yourself without judgment, free yourself from conditioning, and discover truth directly.
Wow. Observe yourself without judgment.
Right. The text is arguing that true, lasting transformation absolutely cannot come from changing your external circumstances. It posits that transformation starts entirely from within, by fundamentally changing how you observe your own thoughts.
Which is just a massive paradigm shift. But I guess before we can get to this lofty goal of, freedom, the author introduces the basic mechanical tool we're supposed to use to actually get there.
Right. It all starts with how we look at ourselves.
Yeah. The text introduces two foundational themes right at the top, which are know yourself and choiceless awareness.
Exactly. And the text frames those two concepts as being inextricably linked.
Like you can't have one without the other.
Right. According to this philosophy, you cannot have real self-knowledge without that choiceless awareness.
The document really insists that self-knowledge is the absolute bedrock. But here is the catch, and I think this is where a lot of people might get tripped up. It requires observing the mind without any judgment whatsoever.
None at all.
Right. The author says you can't control your thoughts, and you can't condemn your emotions. You literally just watch them. It reminds me of that classic mindfulness analogy.
Oh, the highway one?
Yeah. Where it's like sitting on a bench watching traffic on a really busy highway instead of running out into the street to direct the cars, which would be trying to control your thoughts.
Which never works, by the way.
Right, you'd get run over. Or, yelling at the bad drivers, which is condemning your thoughts. Instead of all that, you're just sitting there on the bench watching them roll by.
It's a really common analogy, but what's fascinating here is that if we really want to understand the mechanism the author is describing, we have to go a bit deeper than just, watching cars.
Okay, how so?
Well, the text is actually talking about causality. Like, why does merely watching a thought naturally bring clarity? We don't have to force the clarity.
Right, because I honestly struggle with this part. If I'm sitting on that metaphorical bench and, say, an incredibly angry thought about a coworker comes speeding by, if I just observe it without judging it or trying to stop it, won't that anger just take over?
That's the natural fear, yeah.
Like, how is passivity supposed to lead to clarity?
Because, according to the author, what you are calling passivity is actually the highest form of active observation. Think of it less like watching traffic and more like starving a fire of oxygen.
Oh, interesting.
In this framework, your emotional reaction, the judging, the fighting, the internal dialogue saying, oh, I shouldn't be angry right now, that is the oxygen.
So the resistance itself is the fuel.
Exactly. When you fight the thought, you are actually feeding energy into that neural pathway.
Ah, so the fighting is actually what sustains the confusion and the anger in the first place.
Precisely. The moment you just sit on the bench and observe the angry thought without reacting to it, you cut off its oxygen supply. The author argues that clarity isn't some destination you have to force your way toward. It's just the natural byproduct of not fighting with your own mind.
That is, I mean, that makes so much sense. When you observe without judgment, the thought essentially just burns itself out because it doesn't have any secondary emotional reaction to feed on.
Exactly.
Okay, that mechanical explanation makes so much more sense. It's not about being a passive victim to your thoughts. It's about, not throwing gasoline on the fire.
Right.
But if simply watching our thoughts starves the fire and brings natural clarity, why is it so incredibly difficult for us to actually do it? I mean, I constantly find myself throwing gasoline on every anxious thought I have.
Oh, we all do. And the text points to a very specific obstacle for this, which is our internal programming.
The conditioning.
Right. What the author refers to as our conditioning.
Which brings us to the next major section of the document, exploring freedom from conditioning and freedom from fear. The source explains that our thoughts are deeply, almost invisibly, shaped by outside forces.
Oh, absolutely. Society, religion, culture, past experiences.
Even our parents and the education system.
Mm-hmm.
The author claims we are essentially just walking, talking products of our environments.
Yeah, according to the text, we are basically just a collection of inherited beliefs. And the argument here is that true freedom only begins when we vividly understand this conditioning.
Like seeing the code in the matrix.
Basically, yeah. Because until you see it, you aren't really thinking your own thoughts. You are just playing back a recording that society handed to you.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I have to push back a little bit here. And I think a lot of people listening right now might have this exact same hesitation.
Okay, let's hear it.
Isn't some conditioning absolutely essential? Like society conditions us to be polite or to cooperate. We condition our kids to look both ways before crossing the street so they don't, get hit by a car.
Right.
I certainly don't want to be entirely free of the conditioning that literally keeps me alive and functioning in society.
That is a highly valid point, and it's a critical distinction we have to make when reading this text. We connect this to the bigger picture the document is painting, it becomes clear the author isn't talking about basic functional survival conditioning.
Okay, phew.
Yeah, the text isn't suggesting you forget how to drive a car or forget that fire burns or stop paying your taxes.
So if it's not basic survival programming, what kind of conditioning is the author actually targeting here?
It is entirely targeting psychological conditioning.
Psychological conditioning.
Right. The author's argument is that blindly operating on psychological conditioning prevents us from seeing reality clearly because it creates all these artificial attachments.
Oh, I see. Like what?
Well, psychological conditioning tells us things like, I must achieve this specific career status to be worthy as a person, or I have to follow this specific cultural timeline to be happy.
So functional conditioning is like look both ways so you don't get hit by a bus. But psychological conditioning is if I don't make as much money as my neighbor, I am a fundamental failure.
Exactly. And the text explicitly states that these psychological attachments and constant comparisons are the very root of our fear.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the gap between who we actually are and who our societal conditioning says we should be, that gap is where all our psychological terror lives.
The fear of not measuring up.
Right. Fear of losing status, fear of being judged by these totally arbitrary cultural standards.
And the author is suggesting that deeply understanding this conditioning, like literally watching the machinery of it work in your own mind, using that choiceless awareness is what allows the fear to finally dissolve.
Because you see it for what it is.
Yeah. You realize the fear isn't a fundamental truth about you. It's just a misfiring program.
Yes. And the text introduces a really crucial mechanism that powers this fear, which the author calls psychological time.
This was honestly one of the most striking parts of the notes for me.
Mm-hmm.
Building on this idea of fear, the source guides us right into the concept of time, and specifically when we are actually living our lives.
It's a huge pivot, but so important.
Yeah, the section is titled Live in the Present, and the document presents this incredibly stark, uncompromising equation. Basically, the past creates regret, and the future creates fear.
It is a very binary, almost ruthless way of categorizing our mental time travel.
But the author is absolutely adamant that life only unfolds in the present moment. So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to this right now? Like, How does this actually work mechanically?
Well,
Because I know I spend a huge portion of my day either replaying an awkward conversation from yesterday, which is the regret part, or worrying about a project due next week, which is the fear part.
well,
Why is the brain so obsessed with leaving the present?
if we look at this through an evolutionary biology lens, which really helps contextualize what the author is critiquing here, it actually makes perfect sense.
Okay.
The human brain evolved to constantly simulate the future to avoid predators, right? And to endlessly replay the past to learn from mistakes so we don't, repeat them and die.
It's an ancient survival tool.
Exactly.
Right. But I'm not running from a saber-toothed tiger anymore.
Yeah.
I'm literally just worrying about a vague email from my
Yeah.
boss.
And that's the problem. The evolutionary tool is misfiring in modern society. Your amygdala really can't tell the difference between a physical predator and a missed deadline.
Wow.
And the author of this text points out that this psychological anxiety isn't actually happening in the now.
Yep.
If you are sitting in a comfortable chair, safe in your house, there's no immediate physical danger.
Right.
Yet your heart is racing, you're sweating. Why? Because you are using your current present moment energy to suffer over things that literally do not exist anymore or haven't happened yet.
Because the past is just a memory trace, and the future is just a simulation. Neither of them is actually real.
Right. And here's where the author's argument gets really fascinating. The text implies that psychological time is actually a form of ego preservation.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, we constantly obsess over the past and the future because it reinforces our sense of self, like, I am my past traumas or I am my future ambitions. Without psychological time, the ego feels like it might just cease to exist.
Oh, wow. So we cling to the regret and the fear because it reminds us of who we are.
Exactly.
That is a profound insight.
Yeah.
The author is essentially saying we'd rather suffer in our mental time machine than face the reality of the present moment.
Because the present moment doesn't have that ego baggage.
Right. So how do we break the mechanism? Do we just, force ourselves to think about the present? Do we chant, be here now, until it finally works?
No, and the author is very clear that forcing it would be a huge mistake.
Right, they would be throwing gasoline on the fire again.
Exactly. Trying to control the mind to stay in the present only creates more conflict and more ego. The proposed solution is to apply the choiceless awareness we discussed earlier directly to our experience of time.
Oh, I see. So when my mind inevitably drifts to worrying about tomorrow's meeting, I don't punish myself for drifting.
Right. You don't judge it, you just watch the worry. You observe it and say, okay, my brain is simulating the future again. It's generating fear.
It's labeling it.
Yeah, by simply observing that your mind has wandered into psychological time without fighting it, you cut off the oxygen again. The awareness itself acts as a cognitive circuit breaker, naturally anchoring you back in the present moment.
It's incredible how every single concept in this document connects back to that one core tool.
Right.
Just observing the mechanism without judgment.
It's the skeleton key for everything in the text.
But let's ground this in reality for a second, because I know that a lot of us listening are highly familiar with these concepts. Like, we all know about meditation apps. We've all read about mindfulness. The theory always sounds beautiful.
On paper, yeah.
Right. But how do we apply this when life actually hits us? When we have a stressful boss breathing down our neck, or, deep family drama over the holidays, or a loud neighbor?
Well, the author anticipates this exact disconnect between theory and practice. The text doesn't ask us to retreat to a mountaintop, and it actually offers a pretty sharp critique of how modern society views mindfulness.
Yeah, it really does.
It addresses the real world directly through two vital themes in the text, which are relationships are mirrors and meditation is awareness.
Let's focus on that meditation critique first, because I honestly found the author's stance pretty aggressive here.
It is.
The text states point blank that meditation is not a technique or a ritual. It is continuous awareness in everyday life. The author basically seems to think that sitting in a dark room for 10 minutes is useless if it doesn't translate to real life.
This raises an important question about how we treat wellness today. The text is offering a direct challenge to what we might call the modern wellness industry.
Oh, for sure.
We often treat meditation like an escape pod. We think, my life is incredibly stressful, so I'm going to escape into my app for 10 minutes of deep breathing, find some peace, and then go back out into the stressful world.
And the author argues that's a false peace.
Completely. According to this philosophy, using traditional meditation simply as an escape from the world is just another form of conditioning.
Interesting.
If you are perfectly serene while listening to a singing bowl in a quiet room, but then you lose your temper and scream the second your dog barks or a coworker interrupts you, How deep is that peace, really?
It's incredibly fragile. It relies entirely on the external environment being perfectly controlled. It's easy to think you're perfectly enlightened when you're sitting alone in a dimly lit room, right?
Exactly.
But the second someone cuts you off in traffic, your true inner state is revealed.
Right. True meditation, according to the source, is maintaining that choiceless awareness during our messy, triggering everyday interactions.
The real meditation is observing your own mind while you are arguing with your spouse or while you're paying bills or stuck in traffic,
Yeah, the everyday stuff.
which transitions perfectly into the author's concept of relationships acting as mirrors. And man, this is a tough pill to swallow.
It really is.
The source states that every single relationship we have is merely reflecting our own inner state back to us.
It radically shifts the focus of any conflict from the other person straight back to your own psychology.
So, to use a real-world example, if my neighbor is playing loud music and I get furiously angry, the author is saying the neighbor didn't actually put that anger inside me.
Correct. The author would argue that the loud music is just a trigger. The anger, the stress, the lack of peace that was already dormant inside you, just waiting for an excuse to activate.
Wow.
The neighbor is just acting as your mirror, reflecting your own internal state.
That completely flips how we usually process conflict. I mean, instead of seeing the people who agitate us as obstacles to our peace, this philosophy suggests they are actually incredibly valuable tools for self-discovery.
They are the practice.
Right. If a coworker's comment makes me intensely defensive, the goal isn't to analyze their flaws or figure out why they are a jerk.
Yeah.
The goal is to use choiceless awareness to observe my own defensiveness.
Yeah.
Like, what deep-seated insecurity in me did they just mirror? What piece of my psychological conditioning just got exposed?
Yes, and that is where the real work happens.
Yeah.
But this framework also leads to a very profound and potentially intimidating realization.
What's that?
Well, if true meditation isn't a specific ritual or a technique we can just buy, and we can't rely on our societal conditioning to guide us, and our ego is constantly trying to trick us with psychological time, where does that leave us?
Right.
How do we actually figure out what is true?
Right, like, what is the correct path? And the document provides a very definitive and somewhat radical answer to that in its final major theme, which is truth is a pathless land.
This is really the culmination of the entire text.
Yeah.
The author insists that truth absolutely cannot be found through blind belief, and it cannot be found by following an authority figure. It can only be discovered through direct, unmediated observation.
The text is entirely rejecting the idea of a spiritual or psychological manual, which on one hand is incredibly empowering for you as a listener.
Sure.
But on the other hand, let's be honest, human beings love a good set of instructions.
We really do.
We want someone to say, do these 5 steps and you will be happy. Adhere to this specific philosophy and you will find truth.
We crave the certainty of a map. But if we synthesize everything the author has argued today, we can see exactly why maps are completely useless in this context.
Because it's someone else's map.
Exactly. A map is just a representation of someone else's past experience. It's someone else's conditioning. You cannot walk someone else's path to find your own subjective truth.
Wow.
Truth, as the text defines it, is a living, breathing thing that exists only in the present moment.
So there is no guru coming to save you. There is no rigid system you can just hide behind. It is a philosophy of absolute radical self-reliance. You basically have to hack your own way through the jungle.
Precisely. Because truth is a pathless land, no authority can draw you a map. You have to navigate it directly, moment by moment.
Right.
The only compass you have is your own unconditioned, non-judgmental observation of what is actually happening inside your own mind right now.
You're both the observer and the observed.
Beautifully put.
Okay. We have covered some incredibly dense, challenging terrain today, exploring the mechanics of how we think. Let's do a quick recap of the roadmap laid out in this document.
Sounds good.
We started by exploring the core mechanism, how applying choiceless awareness to our thoughts acts as a circuit breaker, right? Starving our emotional reactions of oxygen and naturally bringing clarity.
Right.
Then we looked at how this unmasks our deep psychological conditioning, which is the root engine of our fears and constant comparisons.
And we also explored that evolutionary trap of psychological time and how stepping out of the past and future dissolves the ego's hold on us.
Right, anchoring us in the present. We discussed the author's sharp critique of meditation as just a temporary escape pod, and how our real-world triggers and messy relationships are actually vital mirrors reflecting our true inner state.
Yeah.
And finally, we arrived at the text's ultimate realization, that truth is a pathless land, a reality we must navigate entirely on our own without gurus or maps, relying only on direct, honest observation.
It's a lot to process, but it's incredibly powerful.
It really is. I want to sincerely thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It takes a lot of mental energy to stop looking outward at the world's problems and start examining the machinery of our own minds.
It absolutely does. And as we leave you today, I want to offer a final thought to mull over, building on the concepts of relationship mirrors and choiceless awareness that the author presented.
Okay.
Later today, when you inevitably feel a sudden flash of intense irritation or frustration towards someone, maybe a coworker, a family member, or even just a driver on the road, what if you didn't react to them?
Oh, that's good.
What if, just for a second, you pause to silently observe your own irritation as if it belonged to a total stranger? What hidden piece of your own conditioning might that mirror reveal to you?